Good afternoon, Ignition Radio listeners. This is Paula and this is Airtime of the Geek. If you're listening to us via TuneIn, hello. I'm sorry, our website is currently down. Hopefully this is still broadcasting. If you're tuning into the live show, it's just gone 1 p.m. and it's the 22nd of February, which means that it's 62 days until the next season of Game of Thrones airs. If you're tuning into the repeated broadcast, it's 1 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central and 8 p.m. Eastern. If you're in another time zone, please look it up. And if you're listening to us via our YouTube page, it's whatever time it says at the bottom corner of your screen. Comments, questions and suggestions, you can email me, paulab@ignitionradio.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, I'm at Airtime Geek, or on Instagram, I am at Airtime of the Geek. If you'd like to call in the studio, the number's 01642 645 827. So I asked my friends what requests they had for this week, anything in particular, and my good friend Robin asked me to talk about him. And I wasn't going to, but I thought maybe I could tell you a good deed of brave Sir Robin. And one day we were driving along to our Dungeons and Dragons game, because that's how we roll, and we spotted a man on the roundabout whose car had broken down, and it was a hot summer's day. So Robin pulled up to the side of the road. He gave the man a bottle of water from the back of his car. He gave him an ice cream cone that he'd just bought that was intended to be for our D&D game, and sort of left the man, who was a bit bewildered but quite happy, on the side of the road, waiting for his pickup truck to arrive and tow his car away. And he had an ice cream and a bottle of water, and I thought that was a very good deed. So, for Robin, I'll play a song which I know he really loves. And believe it or not, this is not sarcasm. And I hope you enjoy it, Rob. Here it is, S Club 7, S Club Party. So for brave Sir Robin, that was S Club 7, S Club Party. This week I went to see the movie Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. I've been looking forward to this coming out since I first read the book about 6 or 7 years ago, and I dragged my bestie to go see it with me, knowing it really wasn't his thing, but Charles Dance was in it, and I know he won't pass up any opportunity to quote German Jerusalem. As zombies go, I'm more or less over them. I was really happy with the resurgence a few years ago, but now they've kind of been done to death. I mean, with the exception of the Walking Dead games by Telltale, because I will play anything that Telltale produces, I've pretty much lost interest, unless it's something really different like Zombievers. And if you haven't seen Zombievers, you need to see Zombievers. So even though in the film they've made a fair amount of changes in the adaptation, I still enjoyed it. Matt Smith, who I intensely disliked as the Doctor, for me actually was one of the highlights of the movie. Whenever he was on screen, I was laughing so hard. He was delightful. I could have watched an entire movie of him just pratfalling about. One of the things that I particularly liked was that it offered a newish take on the zombie legend. I mean, it's not actually that new if you know your zombie history, but we've seen slow, rambling zombies done to death, and that's nothing new. This movie offered something quite different and original. Zombies who appeared fairly human until they ate their first human brain. A bit like the vampires in Lost Boy. They don't become fully zombified until they've made it their first kill. And they can talk, and they can even be reasoned with, and they set traps, which is fairly sophisticated behaviour. I'm quite willing to give something a pass if it's offering up something new and interesting. I could not stand the Twilight series because it was intensely inane drivel, but the idea that vampires avoid direct sunlight because then it becomes obvious that they're not human, that's actually an idea that I quite liked. It's just, why did it have to be that they sparkle like a 5-year-old who's gotten loose with a big pot of glitter? One of my friends expressed a dislike at having seen the movie. He said it was because the zombies talked and the zombies rang, and to be honest, I care about neither of those things, as they both occurred in George A. Romero's classic Night, Dawn and Day trilogy. And since George A. Romero is generally credited as having given birth to the modern zombie genre. I'd say that anything happens in a Romero film is fair game if those are the rules we're going by. But of course, that's if we're selectively forgetting that Night of the Living Dead was based on a novel by a man called John Russo. And it had the same title, Night of the Living Dead, and he worked with George A. Romero to produce the first movie. They parted ways somewhat amicably, but Russo retained the rights to the Living Dead title and allowed Romero to continue making his own sequels. And Russo eventually went on to make Return of the Living Dead with Dan O'Bannon. In Return, zombies move swiftly, they talk, they set traps for the heroes. They're specifically after brains, and that is the origin of the whole zombie brains thing, is from the Return of the Living Dead movie. This film, it's a bit morbid in its sense of humour, and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies actually falls really in with Russo's zombies rather than Romero's, and there's nothing wrong with that because they both created the zombie genre together. Russo wrote the book, Romero directed the film. They worked together on the first film project. Russo had a bit part in it. And then they parted ways and they both went on to make their own interpretations. I've never known of fandom with zombie fans who are so single-minded when it comes to the rules of zombie movies. You know, vampire and werewolf fans generally aren't this divided. Usually, if there's a new kind of movie coming out and it's different rules, vampire and werewolf fans just go, oh, right then, it's different. There are different worlds, and the different rules continue to make things different, interesting. Do you really want to watch the same kind of movie over and over again? I mean, this is what slasher films are for. Now, when I originally wrote this down, I said to myself, but you really like slasher films. And I do like slasher films, but they're the same movie. They're all the same movie. There's a guy, he's got a weapon, he wants to kill people for a reason. Sometimes the reason is explained, but it's generally just for a reason. And most slasher films are basically the same. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy them, it's particularly if they offer something a little bit different. But zombie films, do we really just want to see Night of the Living Dead over and over and over again? Can't we have something a little bit different? And that's what I'm asking of my zombie movies these days. So, all in all, I gave Pride and Prejudice and Zombies a 6.5 out of 10. I thought it was a fun effort, and it was nowhere near as atrocious as Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which was Seth Graham Green's other novel adapted to the screen, and that movie was absolutely awful. So I'm going to have a little break, and what I'm going to do is going to play the next song for you on my list, and I'm going to play the Fifth Element's Diva song. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back, and if you're listening to us via TuneIn, good afternoon. I hope you're enjoying the show this afternoon. And if you want to call in, the studio number is 01642 645 827. If you want to email me, it's paulab@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Airtime Geek, or on Instagram I am at Airtime of the Geek. So for my top 10 list this week, I'm going to be counting down my top 10 villain songs. If you're listening to the show via YouTube, you can of course look up the songs for yourself. If you're not familiar with them, we do have to edit out the music from the YouTube cut of the show. In a musical, the villain should always get the best lines and the best song. I love musicals, and it was really hard to try and get my list down to a reasonable number. I've tried to pick ones that I think are the catchiest, the most memorable. I'm sure I've picked one or two which you may not know at all, and some that you may see was quite obvious, but seeing them on this list might encourage you to see the film or the show it's from. Originally I was going to do a top 15 because I had so many great songs to choose from, but eventually I was hard on myself, whittled it down to 10. So here is my top 10 villain songs. Number 10 from South Park, Bigger, Longer and Uncut. Up There, sung by Satan. South Park began airing in 1997, and this year it will air its 20th season. I've been watching from the start, which makes me feel very old. South Park may be famous for its controversial humour and toilet humour, but it's as experimental as it's controversial, and they've done plenty of concept episodes. In their second year, they created an album of original songs called Chef Aid, and to date they have had 8 video games, with the 9th due out this year. They've changed formats and humour styles and even put episodes together with entirely different animation, and it surprised a few people when the movie came out that it was in fact a musical. And luckily the villain is one of the few songs in the movie that doesn't have any swear words, so I can play it. Satan Sings up there. Traditionally speaking, it's more of an I Want song than a villain song, but it's my list and The Resistance had way too many swear words in it. Number 9, Pete's Dragon. And if you've never seen it, it's one of those criminally underrated Disney films. And the song I've picked is Every Little Piece. It's a film I watched a lot when I was a kid because it was one of my aunt's favourite films. And there are 2 sets of villains in this movie, the Gorgons and Dr. Terminus. But Every Little Piece is a song that you can really see the actors have been tremendous amount of fun with. Carry On cast member regular Jim Dale is joined by Red Buttons, and yes, that's his name, for this number. And if you haven't seen the movie, at least check out the song on YouTube so you can see Jim Dale having a good old chew on the scenery. You will not regret it. So that was Every Little Piece from Pete's Dragon. My number 8 is from the musical Annie, and the song is Easy Street. Do you know who's just brilliant all around? It's Tim Curry. Tim Curry is a shining beacon, even in a truly terrible production, but Annie isn't one of those. Comedian Carol Burnett partners with him for this number, and not only is their physical comedy brilliant, but they genuinely seem to have fun with it, and it's not just a well-written song. It has to be performed well, which is why the 2014 version is so terrible. It's not engaging like the 1982 version. It's dreary background music instead of a powerful, fun performance. To be honest, I don't think there's a single performance from Tim Curry that I didn't revel with glee when watching. So please enjoy Easy Street. So number 7 is from the movie Fern Gully, and the song is Toxic Love. You know, I'm not actually sure if I've spoken about him before, but there's an actor who is really fantastic at being a villain, and his name is Tim Curry. And Tim Curry is a shining beacon, even in a truly terrible production, and Fern Gully is a terrible movie. This is a film I loved when I was a kid, but it is aged horribly. All I could think the last time I was watching is, this film is so 90s, it hurts. It's way too heavy-handed with the environmental message. There are a couple of big-lipped alligator moments, and the animation wasn't all that great, but some of the songs still hold up, and Toxic Love is one of them. And it's a slightly cheeky song for a children's film, but there's a lot of innuendo in it, especially the soundtrack version, and it just gives Tim Curry a chance to show off, and who doesn't love Tim Curry showing off? So that was Toxic Love from the movie Fern Gully. So number 6 is Tim Curry. No, I'm only joking. Number 6 is Report the Genetic Opera, Zydrate Anatomy. And if you've not seen Report the Genetic Opera, it's one of these love it or hate it musicals. I happen to love it. This song in particular is a favourite from the whole musical. It does a great amount of exposition, not just for the plot of the film, but the world it's set in as well. At first, the writers didn't like the idea of Paris Hilton coming onto the project, as her reputation preceded her as a spoiled heiress wannabe singer who'd caused damage to her face with plastic surgery, and then they realised that she was auditioning for the part of a spoiled heiress wannabe singer who had caused damage to her face with plastic surgery, and they figured, well, actually, she's pretty perfect. Repo's a movie that's filled with despicable characters, so honestly it's really hard to try and choose which villain song to go with, especially when there's so much choice. But the character of the grave robber who sings Zydrate Anatomy is not a heroic character. As the name implies, he's a grave robber, and he sells anaesthetic drugs to surgery addicts, not for the love of his heart, but for cash. So I think we can agree he's not a good guy. And have a listen to Zydrate Anatomy. So number 5, I promise this is actually the last Tim Curry song on the list. Muppet Treasure Island Professional Pirate. Muppet Treasure Island is the only version of Treasure Island worth watching. Part of the reason, well, Tim Curry, obviously. Why is Tim Curry always a villain? Why does Tim Curry always get the best villain songs? He's Tim Curry. This should be all the reason you need. Try listening to Professional Pirate and not want to sign up for a life of villainy. I dare you. So, my top 4 was actually really, really difficult, and I'm not even happy with the order that I've put them in now. I might be topping and changing them for the next few weeks, but I've got to do a show now, so this is the order I'm going with. Number 4, Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, I Cannot Believe My Eyes. If you're not familiar with Joss Whedon's Writer's Strike project, Dr. Horrible is something that the Buffy creator and puppet master of the Marvel Cinematic Universe put together with the help of his brother and friends during the massive downtime that he had in that period. Gathering some talent and paying for all of it out of his back pocket, the mini 3-part musical comes from the perspective of Billy, aka Dr. Horrible, as he tries to join the Evil League of Evil. The Evil League of Evil? The Evil League of Evil. And win the heart of his favourite girl from his arch nemesis superhero, Captain Hammer. Billy tries to impress Bad Horse, the thoroughbred of sin, with his evilness, and Captain Hammer's mostly successful tries at stopping him tend to foil his plans. You can't help but adore Dr. Horrible, and even though he's the villain, he is a villain, so I chose one of his songs. And there is a lot to choose from, but in the end I went with I Cannot Believe My Eyes. I Cannot Believe My Eyes because I simply couldn't choose the entire musical. A friend of mine did suggest me just doing a whole show on Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, and I said, well, that would create some copyright issues, but here we go. I Cannot Believe My Eyes. So, number 3, The Lion King, Be Prepared. You might know that Jeremy Irons voiced Scar in The Lion King, but you may have even heard that Jeremy Irons blew his voice trying to perform the song. Recently, though, Jim Cummings set the record straight. The rumour was that Jim Cummings sang the latter half of the song, but he told a story at a convention where he sang basically the entire song, and Irons only performed the speaking part. It's about time Jim Cummings got the proper credit for not only a perfect impression of Jeremy Irons' singing voice, but for performing one of the greatest villain songs of all time. My number 2 selection. This was really, really, really hard, trying to figure out which way around I was going to put these 2 songs, and in the end I just ended up picking an order, and even now I'm looking at it thinking, can I switch them? But no, I'm going to stick with what I'd planned. Number 2 is Hocus Pocus, I Put a Spell on You. And Hocus Pocus is one of those movies that you mention, everyone immediately starts gushing about how much they love it, unless, of course, they have no soul. Bette Midler's performance of this song is probably one of the most memorable parts of the movie, and if you look around the internet you will see hundreds of covers, because it seems that people just enjoy how much fun is in this number. And yeah, like, the whole film isn't a musical, but the Sanderson sisters are villains, and this is their villain song. So I don't think anyone would begrudge me including this on my list, unless, of course, they don't have a soul. I will apologise in advance, however, there is not a soundtrack version of this song. They never recorded one, very sadly, so this is the cut from the movie. So, my number 1 is from The Little Mermaid, and it's Poor Unfortunate Souls. I actually don't think that there's anything new I can say about this song that hasn't already been said. The Disney Dream Team of Alan Menken and Howard Ashman, this song was perfect. This was probably the best song that they ever wrote, and it's my number 1 choice because I still can't choose between this and Hocus Pocus. So that was my top 10 villain songs. Some honourable mentions, and believe me, I had a really tough time trying to narrow down the list. Epiphany from Sweeney Todd, What You Feel from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, from their musical episode Once More With Feeling, the Mob Song from Beauty and the Beast, Sweet Transvestite from the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I had to limit myself to 3 Tim Curry songs. In the Dark of the Night from Anastasia, which was performed by Jim Cummings, and the Serial Killers song from Psychoville, which probably actually would have made my top 10 had it not for being the fact that every other word is a swear word. So what songs did you agree with? What songs did you love? Which ones did you hate? Who did I forget? Email me, Paula B, at ignitionradio.co.uk. Get in touch with me on Twitter, at Airtime Geek, or follow me on Instagram, at Airtime of the Geek. Now I'm going to start us off with a bit of geeky music, and I'm going to be playing some different stuff, like a remix of Bruin and G, which Lex fans I'm sure will be very excited about. Some Captain America, some original stuff. We're going to enjoy this for the rest of the afternoon.